And Shumaji would say, what about this? You know, to me, she's so sometimes she'd come and, like, I think there was a story where sometimes I felt that I was getting involved in things that weren't necessarily related to me, but more what was happening around. Like once at Shudy Camps, she arrived with a whole pile of rolls of fabric, exquisite material from, I think it was from France or something, brocade, beautiful. And I was sort of working away, and someone comes and says, oh, she wants to see you. So I walk in, and I remember she's sitting at the end of the room, the door, I walk in the end of the room, and there's people lining the side walls, no? And there's all this fabric in front of her. And I open the door, she goes, oh, come in, you know, nice to see you, you know, this and all of a sudden, out of the blue, for me, you know, I mean, obviously there was been discussions, okay, she says to me, is it true that you can't have, I think it was green and pink, together? And they were talking about this fabric for curtains. And you know, like it was a totally abstract question for me. You know, like I'm walking in, I hadn't been involved in the previous, I mean, obviously there was previous discussions about pink and green, but it was presented to me, is pink and green, you know. And I said, well, Shumaji, not that I know of, I mean, I wasn't really sure what she was talking about either, but, you know, I said, no. And then, like I wasn't in the room, she turned around to the people in the room, she says, see? Like they must have told her that it wasn't. Now, in retrospect, I'm sure that it might have been something, because, you know, Shudy Camps, there were certain parts of Shudy Camps that had heritage listed and weren't allowed to be touched. So, like, there was a portion of the ceiling that had some sort of, you know. And so there may have been a discussion about the colour of the period, but I wasn't party of any of that. I was just asked a point blank, black and white question. And I'm saying to her, no, as far as I know, pink and green is great. Wrong answer. Right, you know. And then she proceeded to virtually chastise the people that were in the room in front of me, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, this is not good. You know, what do I, you know, it's like as if I walked into and I was part of the, whatever was to happen, I had a role, you know, and I wasn't really sure what the role was, but, and then she said to me, thanks and see you later. You know, and I'm walking back out with these people. I feel them looking at me like, you know, we'll get you later. You know, so, you know, I've had a number of experiences like that where she said, now, you know, is it true that this is this? I'm thinking, is this a trick question? Or, and it has happened, and for whatever reason, and I was, to some extent, I wasn't party of the discussions at the beginning or after I left, because she'd say, okay, thanks, see you later, you know. And then, no doubt, there were discussions about it. So, and that was just over colour of fabric for curtains, you know. So yeah, a few things like that happened. That she said, see, it's not true what you told me, like, you know. But, you know, I was never party to the initial discussions, you know. So, yeah, the number of things like that did happen throughout the time, and it was more related to people being concerned about setting up for the, you know, they had puja. I still remember the first year, those Austrian boys, they worked like, I mean, I felt really bad. I felt guilty that these poor blokes set up this whole tent and stage, and they were pushing Sri Maj to have the puja down in this pendle. And virtually at the last death knock, she said, "No, we're going to have it at the hangar," because Frank said it's going to be finished. And of course, they're looking at it and saying, this place, you're lying to us, so, but, all due respects, they picked it up and they moved it, and they, without too much, I mean, if it was anywhere else, there would have been, it would have been a riot. He'd done all that work, and then they would have come up and, it was. I must admit, I did feel guilty, but and I don't know whether she sensed that I felt bad, because as soon as she stepped on that bridge, she said to me, "They told me you couldn't do it." And I'm like, and I suppose the argument could have been, well, it wasn't 100% finished, so so that's they weren't 100% wrong, that's for sure. But that was, it was all part of the deal, and there's no question that the issues that did appear were a lot easy. There never seemed to be a problem, right? At where we were. I mean, on the other side, there was all sorts of things happening. Yes, and like I said, in Shudy Camps, there was the media, which I was part of it, but not really, because they asked me the questions. Here I am, an Australian, no work permits. If they really investigated, all of us working at Shudy Camp at the time were illegals, illegal aliens. I don't think there was one Englishman there. So, there's a pile of, there's a few Indian girls and French, and there wasn't an English person at the time when the media arrived, so you can't just actually. So they're asking questions, and some of them rather pointed ones too. Like, hey, I don't know whether I want to answer any of this, because. And I had to say to them, well, I don't know. I'm just here. I just got a small part. And I went to Canorjaharie. We put up the hangar, and then I left after the puja. So to that point, I only saw her during the puja. And actually, when she walked in, she had a chat to me, and she asked, and then she said to me again, you did finish it this time, so because we were putting the last sheet on the shed, and then during the puja, she called me up, and we had a chat just then. That was a total involvement with me and her in Canorjaharie. So it was definitely arm's length. I'd get messages, but that's spoke about the political side. She used to tell me, well, the mayor wants money and this and that. And we had to do this, and you should go and talk to him. Like they were more so. She's never been physically on site directing the traffic when I was involved. I would have to go and see her, or people would come and see me in the main. Usually at the end, then we'd sort of have a bit of a chat about how it was going to evolve and what the intent. She told me very early in the piece that she wanted to give Cabella to Sarjoga. 3 properties. We spoke about building hangars in India and other places. A lot of them didn't happen, but a lot of that discussions with Shiraji happened, but not, and some of them not necessarily, was more related to a long-term, and she spoke about her long-term vision of Cabella, of the property in India, in Delhi, and so on, even Giddgegannup. So even she mentioned, spoke about Balmoral, but in terms of and Cabella were built in Perth. That's the other interesting part about that one.
The Canorjaharie one's not the same?
No. Canorjaharie is actually a farm shed. She came to Perth. We had anyway, and on her way to the airport, at that time there was Stephen with her in the car, and they drove down Fauntleroy Avenue, which is where we built it, and Stephen said to her in the car, "Oh, Shamaji, that's hangar Frank built." That Stephen at the time told me, and so when I went to New Zealand, I didn't know she knew anything about hangars. So that's the conversation came from him, by him saying, "Oh, Frank built that," because they drove past it. And she said to me, I saw this thing, the hangar you built at the airport, would they make, what did she say? Could they make or could they be made into an ashram or something like that? I said, I said to her, I never really thought of it, but I don't see any reason why not. Because the one at the airport's a lot bigger than the one at Gidgee. And that's about 35 metres wide, that thing. So it's pretty, so that's where she saw it. And then, on the way back from New Zealand, she asked the question. Now, you got to recall, but we were in Maylands. She came to Maylands, and she said to me, people, there was obviously, people felt that this building, because we renovated Maylands, and every weekend there would be people come. So people felt that, hold on, Sarjaga's not only about renovating properties. So there was, obviously it must have gone back to her, because she said to me, when she walked into Maylands, she said to me, they told me it was small, but this is not small. Well, it wasn't big, but that was the comment she made to me. And then it occurred that she said, at the same visit, she was there a couple of days at Maylands, and she said, now what you should do is go closer to the city and find virtually a dilapidated building, a bigger one, and do it up for an ashram. And of course, I think that's in a talk amongst Sarjagis, two Sarjagis in Maylands. So which people were horrified, God, no, not, but that came from her. You should go out looking, and we went out looking, and we started looking, and then we found a few places which even I would have been thinking, oh no, this is more than a couple of years. But anyway, and then she said you should get a country property. That's where the country property came about. It's better to, And at that time, Joan Robin had just purchased, I think, not long, Giddgegannup. And if I'm not wrong, I think they had purchased it finalised the purchase between her coming to Perth and going over east for the rest of the Australian tour, to the point that when we came back, I think from New Zealand, I don't know she found about Robin and Joe. But she said to me, Joe and Robin have kindly, sort of suggested that we could have a portion of their property, and that's where you should build the hangar. She also did say at that time, you build 4, and Perth could become an international centre where people from overseas could come here, and that was all of that occurred as part of discussions. Like I said, she asked about the hangar on the plane, whether it was possible, and then I was in her room at Burwood. And she said to me, Joe and Robin have kindly, said that we could have 10 acres or whatever it was, 5 acres, whatever. And you could build 4 hangars there and a little cottage for me and Sir CP when we come. And this will be an international centre. Shudy Camps was slightly different because I always had a sense at Shudy Camp that someone was setting me up to... Because I'd been involved in Rome in the early 80s, in Rome, 84. I got my realisation in Cambridge, stayed there for a few months, then went to Rome, at the ashram in Rome. And at that time I was in the centre of Rome, but they had just rented a place in the country, this old building which... this couple owned it, and she was an artist and he was a doctor or something, husband and wife. But one of them had died. I think the wife had died. So this was their country retreat, big, old, rather large building. And I remember going there and they were doing sort of renovating a bit to turn it into an ashram, getting some bedrooms done. I remember it was middle of winter. It was freezing cold. There was no heating, nothing. They put floors in the attic and built rooms up there and so on. And at that time, I spent probably a good 6 months there before coming back to Perth, just working in this ashram with Guido and Akbar and the people there. And then probably a year or 2 years later, I get a phone call from Guido and saying, Guido telling me, well, Shumadaji's bought this house in Shudy Camps and she wants you to go and, do this. And I'm thinking, all right, okay. So I'm thinking, did she? But anyway, interestingly enough, Shudy Camps, I get a phone call, and I was in the Middle East at the time. Shumadaji wants to sell Shudy Camps. And it was suggested that because she did know that I was in the Middle East, like Shumadaji, because she had come to Dubai when I was there, and, that we had discussions, about the hangar in Cabella, because I was in the Middle East at the time when the first one, we spoke about it even in Dubai. And so I get a phone call saying, Shumadaji said that she wants to sell Shudy Camps, and whether there's a buyer in the Middle East, basically. Arabs love England, used to like to look at properties in England and so on and so forth. And interesting enough, that was one of my jobs, really. I worked for this, a member of the royal family, which I looked at properties for him in London. Actually, interestingly enough, just down the road from Brompton Square. Because when I went there, I thought, I know this place. but yeah, so, and
I think I'm going to hit Stop that, Frank.
No worries. Perfect.
We go on and on and on.